Talking Sense viewers, I am here with Dan Gottlieb, Analyst for TOPO. And what I love about Dan and TOPO is they only focus on best in class. So all of the research you're going to hear from Dan, all of his points of view are based on literally the best B2B companies in the world and what they're doing. So we're going to dig in. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. When you came here, I showed you, I have your report. I love it. Look, it's all dog-eared and written up. I carry it around with me everywhere.
And I appreciate that. It's a labor of love getting that thing built and produced. So it means a lot to see it earmarked, wrinkled, and in your hands. And I'm looking forward to talking through that thing today.
I'm hoping you'll autograph it for me later.
Happily, absolutely.
Okay, good. So let's get into the report. I think BDRs are a big fucking deal. Mm-hmm. I believe you agree with me.
I do.
Share some of the findings, because I feel like the first page of this, your key findings on how effective the channel is justifies the whole thing right there. So tell us what you found.
Companies significantly rely on sales development teams. And a lot of fast-growing companies, I mean, I'm talking companies that are between 50 and 100 million and 100 million plus, rely significantly on the sales development team in order to generate pipeline. And not just pure outbound, although we do see some companies having up to 80% of their pipeline solely coming from outbound SDRs. Marketing is also, and this is one of the more exciting things that's not just coming from our research, but our marketing research. Marketing is starting to realize just how important sales development team is to proving what they're doing is turning into pipeline. And so the variables that are also contributing to this is that sales development is a highly strategic talent pipeline. And so companies that see sales development as a talent pipeline and as literally a pipeline creator and see them as equally valuable to their business are pumping resources into sales development because of the way that they're able to create more predictable pipeline. But that's just the point. Is that all roads are leading through SDRs and creating pipeline. This doesn't mean to say that you can't build a business without SDRs. But what it is proving is that SDRs have a seat at the table. C-level executives are paying a lot of attention to what's happening in sales development because of the significance and the dependability with which they're creating pipeline.
What else was in there, though, is, everybody wants to be ABM. Everyone wants to do account-based. I think it's really just good sales and marketing, but that's for another episode. But in your research, you found it's kind of make or break if you're trying to move to account-based. Is that true?
Completely. This isn't just our opinion, it's from our marketing research too. I mean, marketers tell us that the most important channel for them and the most important tactic in their account-based programs is the sales development team's outreach. Right? That's not just coming from us saying, hey, marketing, you need us. It's marketing saying, oh my gosh, we need the sales development team for these programs. And it just makes sense. If you strip away the titles, what you see is a group of people whose job it is to think about the accounts that make sense. And then a group of people whose job it is to design a program for those accounts, right? What do they have in common? What's going to be the kind of thing that we can give them that's going to want them to engage with us that's valuable? Is that a workshop? Is it a live event? Is it a piece of content? Is it a report that we write? Then there's a group of people whose job it is to create awareness around this. And then there's a group of people whose job it is to reach out and actually schedule the conversations. When done really well, that is creating a much more consistent approach to turning those into good meetings and good opportunities for the sales team.
Because otherwise you're just kind of hoping.
Well, you're just more targeted in your marketing effort. You're using all of their similar programs, but what you're allowing with the SDR team is, one, they love it, by the way, because they are now reaching out with this way better ask than just, do you want to see a demo? Do you want to meet with my sales team and just talk about how awesome our company is? They're reaching out with this unique point of view, with this thing to give that they're excited about, they're pumped about, and it gives them way more confidence. And from the marketing standpoint, right, you're literally watching your programs turn into meetings and opportunities.
But that's our job, right, as marketers, is with that SDR function, is not to say, hey, go out and treat every account the same. It's to be able to give them ample insights and also commercial teaching and content and allow them to focus on the right accounts.
The challenge is how do we make sure that those turn into human conversations? And the sales development team's the front line of that. They're the first line of those conversations. And so organizing through the conversations is the difference maker, is that we're not looking at the programs just based on how many people that the sales development team is now given the right to reach out to, given the ability to reach out to. It is, let's make sure that these turn into conversations that are not just about sales. It's about what the buyer, what the person that we're trying to sell to actually cares about.
How do people know what people care about?
Well, that's where the collaboration comes in between sales development, and marketing, right? And I think we're talking now about account selection. How do we pick accounts, and then how do we design programs against those accounts? And there's just several different ways that we've seen companies think about this. I'll give you a couple of examples. So some groups, the easy way that we think about it is industry-based, right? You have a group of target accounts, you slice it by industry, and you say, but this is the key. We're not just running an industry play. What we're doing is we're just saying, what do people in this role, what do marketers, like let's say we're selling to marketers, what do marketers in manufacturing care about? And then we're going to create content that says, right, the future of marketing and manufacturing. And then when we reach out, we're focusing on, hey, I want to talk to you about how we're working with specific manufacturing companies. Here's this really cool report that we tailored to you. Do you want to read it? Right? That's a completely different way of thinking about it versus just saying, okay, we've organized, we now know we want to go after this group of manufacturing marketing leaders. Here's your sales engagement, right, touch patterns, go reach out to them and hope for the best. We're encouraging the sales development team to intellectually meet the buyers with the kind of content, and we're seeing that all the way through to make sure that the conversations that we have are about what CMOs and manufacturing care about, not a sales demo.
It's preparing them with commercial teachings.
Completely, yes, but in the heart...
Programmatically. It's not asking them to, like, actually it's interesting. I sat with our BDRs for a day, and one of my big ahas was we're not providing enough commercial teachings, right in front of them. And so now someone from my team, her responsibility is, refreshing those, providing those, making sure they have good content that ties to what we know our personas care about.
Which brings on a whole new way of having to think about how you work with the SDRs, right? Because, and I completely agree, that's what it is. Commercial teaching, talking to them about what they care about, right? Giving them something of value. It's all hinting around the same idea, which is that let's meet them, let's give them something that's gonna help them think differently. If I'm selling to execs, let's give them big ideas, right? If I'm talking to someone that's more on a tactical level, that's living through pain of some sort, let's talk through use case stories, some transformation stories that they might be interested in. And now the new wave is, how do we enable a group of SDRs to do that, right? And that is where the difference between these companies that are doing a great job, the marketers that say, look, we need these SDRs to understand how to tell these stories. We need these SDRs to be able to understand how to communicate the value of this thing that we're providing that's separate. How do we untrain them from the sales training that they've had to focus on just having a valuable conversation, and then do that differently every 6 weeks?
So I have no dog in this fight, but in your research, you say that most SDR functions, 65%, I believe, report up to sales.
Yeah.
But what you just told me is if we want them to be successful, there's a lot of setup content that they require from marketing.
What we're showing you is what the data is telling us about where people are reporting to, but our point of view on where they should report is actually much simpler than that. Our point of view on where they should report is that the director needs to be able to work with a relationship with the C-level or the VP that is going to advocate for the most amount of resources for the sales development organization that gets what they need, whether that's in sales ops, whether it's the CEO, whether it's marketing ops, whether it's CMO or VP of sales.
So putting it bluntly, the person who cares the most.
Well, it is kind of funny, right? That's what it is. And so it's where should they report? The person that is the organization that's going to resource them the most. Because we can talk about the conceptual, right? Of course, it may, in that use case, sure, you could draw an argument why maybe it makes more sense for marketing. But then you could also draw what will, it could make more sense for sales because they got to be able to go through those hard outbound tactics. They got to learn how to strategically navigate an account. But
Well, and I also think there's the progression path. Like, they can't work for me for very long.
Right.
So that becomes, to me, that's what I worry about, is I've got to make sure that they have a spot and that they're progressing through, because I don't have the same headcount demands that a sales leader does. So they have to feel part of the sales team, even if they report to me.
Completely. And this is where expectations and culture come in, because sales development is one of the only teams in go-to-market that really sits across all these different functions, right? They sit across the demand gen team. They sit across the account-based marketing team. They sit across the sales organization. They sit across channel partners. They sit across expansion. They're this resource, this cannon that you can sort of steer in different directions depending on what the business needs. But in order for that to work, you have to have a tremendous amount of clarity around the expectations, around what they can produce, and the resources that are required to make that effective.
Do most companies do enough?
I think that most companies, if you were to ask them that question, they would say that they're spending a lot on SDRs. I don't think that they're thinking about it methodically enough in a way that allows them to ensure that that team is producing consistently in all of the different segments that it supports. So do I think that they're doing enough? There are a lot of companies out there that get this, that are pumping a ton of resources, but maybe I should just talk you through what do they need to have.
Yes.
Right? So the first thing that they need to have is clear alignment around what they're doing within each segment. So if I'm supporting, let's break it down into the three basics. I've got my enterprise segment, I've got a mid-market segment, which tends to vary those definitions by company, and I've got this SMB segment, right? Smaller businesses. And so what are we doing? How do we steer the SDR cannon along those lines? Well, for my enterprise team, we're going to be focusing way more on partnering with our account-based marketing program to go outbound. For my mid-market team, what we need is much more of a balanced approach where we're thinking about how do we, we're going to be doing a lot of outbound activity into those segments, but we need to do it as it's a little bit of a larger addressable market. So we need to have a bit more speed, a bit more efficiency, right? And we need to have higher qualification criteria because of how many people we're talking to. And then the SMB segment, well, our demand gen machine has just been rocking it lately. And so let's just make sure we meet all of our inbound lead demands within that segment. So if you're able to create that kind of clarity around exactly what it is the team's going to be focusing on and how much of their time is going to be spent on each of those activities, then that's a core first start.
So you would advocate then for separating inbound, outbound?
Not necessarily. I mean, so I think that
depending on the segment.
When SDRs are focused, they are able to be more productive. And that's inarguable in our data, in our findings, and in working with our clients to make these kinds of changes. Account-based is inherently in hybrid role, right? Because anytime a lead comes into an account that is on your target list, you're going to get routed. That's going to get routed to you. So it is inherently a hybrid role. For markets and for businesses where we need to primarily focus a lot of our effort on generating activity into a market, perhaps where we don't have the marketing resources, this is very common in startups, then it makes a lot of sense to have our outbound teams completely focused on certain segments within our ideal customer profile. We're seeing a lot more companies move towards this named account model.
Sure.
That's replacing outbound because we have enough data using different tools to say, look, you can only hit 1,000 accounts maximum if we're lucky in a year. Maximum if we're lucky in a year. And if that's the case, we should pick the top 1,000 accounts to work through. Or even let's just start with 500 for the next 6 months.
Well, I loved that in the benchmark is you said, 100 accounts?
That is what we typically recommend. If you're going to go outbound, it's maximum about 100 accounts per SDR in a month. That
was great for me because now all of a sudden you have it's a capacity benchmark to say if we're not meeting 100, where are we wasting our time? Or if we're maybe hitting over 100, are we not really hitting them well?
Yeah.
Okay, so comping SDRs,
Yeah.
meetings or pipeline?
I think you do both. It's totally reasonable to break out the variable into a couple of different things. The first thing is what they can control, which should make up between 60 to 70% of their variable. In some cases, that might mean a really qualified meeting or a pre-opportunity or almost an opportunity. And that definition might be like, we have the right person and we know that they have some kind of need, and we define need by they have an interest in a business use case.
Sure.
And then the opportunity piece, right? So now going back to the spirit of the law.
Yes.
We have a skin in the game with sales. We want to value quality. However, whether or not that turns into qualified pipeline isn't always in our control. So let's have the 30% of our variable be focused on pipeline, or number of opportunities, or number of opportunities that get to a certain stage. Something that shows sales we have skin in the game.
Well, I feel like that's another great thing from the report was, often it's, oh yeah, they set up meetings or they contributed pipeline, but it's not the pipeline that closes. But that's not what you found.
In the businesses where usually the SDR the SDR opportunities are not closing, we typically see that being a result of a few things. It's the quality of what they're working, the accounts, the leads. It's the quality of what they're doing and what are they qualifying for, right? What's the surface level? How deep in the conversation are they going? Are they just booking meetings? And then we can look better at those and analyze whether or not what the SDRs are doing is what's contributing to that quality. On the flip side, right, if we're just generating a bunch of meetings and then we're complaining about the quality of what sales development is, well, that makes sense why they're lower quality, because the threshold for them to get the sales is much lower. So you have to think about it as this sort of like water pressure, and you're just dialing up different levels of water pressure. On this side, it's what enters sales development, the quality of the accounts, the quality of the leads. Then there's the messaging that we use to apply to that. That's completely in our control, the messaging, what they're qualifying for. Are they asking you, do you want to have hey, we have dope software, do you want to meet and see it, right? If that's all you're doing, then obviously you're only having people that are surface level interested in learning about your software come to meetings. So of course they're not going to be opportunities that are going to close. They're just initial meetings. And in some businesses on the street, that's all that they're asking for. But they're comping SDRs on opportunities, and so it creates this unhealthy tension.
Sure. But I saw in your research that it was 22%.
Yeah. So for the businesses that have, so now let's think about businesses that have opportunities we have stricter qualification criteria around when it actually becomes an opportunity, right? And when we look at the businesses that have that dialed in, where they have SDRs bringing high quality conversations to the table or qualified opportunities depending on the business, right? And they have great qualification criteria and a clear closed loop where the AEs are able to say, this isn't quite ready yet, so let's not let it enter our pipeline yet, right? Let's get it back to the SDRs. Then we are seeing a significantly higher SDR close rate because they're only letting quality into the pipeline.
Dan, let's talk about tech.
Okay.
So we talked about making sure they have the right content and messaging.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the dials and having the right criteria so everyone's on the same page. How does technology enable STRs? What's like the minimum tech? What's like super tricked out?
At a root level, you have to have your CRM, your database.
Sure.
You have to have sales engagement products. So that's either a combination of email, right? A combination of email, dialing, sending LinkedIn messages from a single spot, right?
Sure.
Some companies have more call heavy, they'll have a dialer, some have more email heavy. You have to have sales engagement technology that best suits your go-to-market. We definitely recommend the kinds of products where you can have a single hub for executing emails, calls, LinkedIn from the same. You have to have those two at the bare minimum. You have to have LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's just...
Is what it is.
It is what it is, right? It is what it is. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Then, and by the way, LinkedIn has the potential to become the outbound channel because of the types of functionality that they're putting in there. In fact, if you go look at what happened in Europe, the giant GDPR scare, right?
Sure.
A lot of lawyers told their marketing teams to just shut it all down. But and that meant that sales development teams were scared and do not send any prospecting emails, right? And so as a result,
Everyone did LinkedIn.
everyone went to LinkedIn, and it created this need to be highly creative. How do you stand out? How do you become a standout seller on LinkedIn? And this whole set of best practices kind of came out of that. The people that talk about social selling, we'll talk about all that later, right? They'll say, I told you so, I told you so. The reality, though, is that market demands drove them to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a channel amongst many. There's so many benefits to having access to that kind of data. It's the only database in the world where B2B professionals
Are all there.
and they give their information up. Not only like, hey everybody, I'm keeping it updated on my own, right?
Right.
That's not 100% true all the time, but you get the point.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so gotta have LinkedIn. So then, past that, you gotta have data, especially if you're going outbound. You gotta have account level data. You gotta have contacts. It's just way harder to do your job if you don't know which accounts and you don't have contact level data for those accounts.
Sure.
Right? That's critical. So with that in mind, right, those are some of the core tools that you got to have in order to do your job. And then on the flip side, from an inbound perspective, this idea of chat is becoming more and more and more and more important. From an outbound perspective, so I'm now going into more of the add-ons, right?
Yes.
From an outbound perspective, you're seeing a lot of companies investing in direct mail and video to help stand out. Direct mail directly correlated to account-based. We see some companies just saying, hey, STRs, here's a percent of we're going to give you a $500 monthly budget. Go spend it on sending us whatever you want out of these direct mail products.
We've had a lot of guests come on and talk about how they've incorporated direct mail into their ABM flow and process.
I think a great example of direct mail is literally sending someone a copy of a report with a one-page typed up of why you think that they would benefit from it, right? That is thoughtful. So there's a lot of different examples of direct mail. And video is exciting. It is a way to stand out. It favors the extrovert. It also, though, it creates this way of connecting with somebody that's just personal and human.
Sure.
But it's also hard to scale.
So thinking about intent and being able to say, okay, for example, if I know an SDR can work 100 accounts a month, my job is to get 100 accounts for every hire I'm going to hire in market for them to work. So they're only working high intent accounts.
And it makes a ton of sense for them to focus on high intent words so that they can try to steer their outbound resources to contacts that they think are actually going to be relevant, and it helps you create much more relevant messaging. The hard part is which of these accounts do I spend a ton of time personalizing? Which accounts do I use some semi-custom amount of personalization? And then is there a place for, and if so, when do we use full-blown template messaging?
Right, and that's where AI can literally tell you. That can be the new sorter. Like as a SDR leader, you don't need to do that sorting yourself if you have the right technology.
Absolutely. I think that's the most important promise of AI is helping sales development leaders and not just sales development leaders, I mean, go-to-market leaders. Think about how to better support their SDRs by instead of saying, hey, figure out which accounts to reach out to in a more efficient amount of time, in a more methodical way, we can say, here are the accounts that you should reach out to over the next month and a half, 2 months, and here's why we chose them. And doing that efficiently is 100% the promise of AI.
Let's save people from that wake-up call and tell them right now, what do we need to do to support this channel effectively? What do they need?
I think that there are several things. Let's start at the top. The first is, and in order to think about this, you got to really just step outside of it, which is, I think, the hard part for sales development teams and leaders to do. But look at the organization and say, where are they spending their time? I mean, go facilitate and ask them, do their homework, figure it out. Where's the time going? And you'll find out it's going to a couple of different places. Number one, it's going into picking accounts, figuring out which accounts to reach out to. Number two, it's how much time they're spending doing research, the black hole of research. If you've ever done SDR research, you go to a room full of SDRs and you say, raise your hands if you have ever, accidentally ended up on your prospect's wedding website. And you'll see more than half the room will put their hands up in the air. It's just, it's right. You're spending too much time doing research when you're on their wedding website.
But don't you think, there are people that have philosophies that doing research is kind of like, I'm too shy to make the call. So I'm still researching.
I'm spending too much time crafting my message. This is all, so you gotta really understand where the time is going. And so it's usually in these operational things before I even make calls. And the second place it's usually going, other than these sort of internal operational challenges, too many meetings with my AEs, too many internal meetings, right? Those are usually the two culprits. And then the third one, this is really important. The third one is just bad time management habits, ping pong table, Instagram, Snapchat, personal email. These are very real challenges. And then there's this other culprit, Slack. So
we joke about Slack being like the biggest time waster. I mean, we all love Slack, but it's
so this it's just you just have to be really objective about the reality of the time. So
daily. So this was controversial. So daily schedule and goals. Or weekly.
Yeah. So now let's take a step out, right? I wanna. How do we help address all of those issues? How do we help address all of those issues?
I can help you with account selection.
And we'll talk about that. I think that's a really important one. How do we help address that issue all the way down? And then how do we help them on a regular basis, right? So one of the key responsibilities of the sales development director, this goes back to the org design, is to be able to understand how to advocate for what the sales development team needs to be more efficient. And that includes being able to explain how much money is being wasted on some of these activities. So, how do we solve it? That's the question. Let's start at the top. The first one is dedicated operational time, where a percentage of their time, whether it's marketing ops, sales ops, revenue ops, whatever you call it.
Right. It's all revenue ops now.
Their responsibility, there's a percentage of helping the SDRs pick the accounts that they're going to be working within a period of time. And instead of saying, here's your 6-month universe, go figure it out, they're literally saying, here's what you're going to work this month. And for companies that are doing this really well, they're investing in data quality, data management teams, where they're hourly workers, where their job, they're sometimes entry level to the business, where they're putting contacts into the database. So instead of saying, okay, here's your territory, go figure it out, or here's your 500 accounts, go figure it out.
See, I can automate all that though.
You go say, hey, look, here's what I'm asking you to do, and here are the contacts. And honestly, STRs love that.
Yeah.
Now I've given you so much more time back. Now I have to prioritize within that list, but guess what? That's a much better way to spend my time. And that's operational
And that goes
support.
back to the sorting that we already talked about.
That's
Because that
right.
can be done by AI too.
100%.
You get in there and they're only the accounts in market.
And it is very, very important for SDRs to understand why they have those accounts. You cannot miss that step. Understand why they have accounts.
So what brought them, what they were researching
Exactly.
anonymously, what keywords were most interested, why that score is what it is.
Culturally, SDRs want to learn. You get into sales because you want to learn. And you're entry level in many cases. I want to learn, so tell me the why. Give me the peek back. Don't just tell me here are your accounts. Go figure it out, kid. Right?
Right.
Give them access to the why. That's critical. Same thing, by the way, before we go on into the execution side. Same thing, by the way, for inbound. So tell them what's going on with the model. I have a client where the demand gen model, that 7,000 leads a month, designed on an 8% conversion rate.
Okay.
Do the math, okay? That means 8 out of 100 leads are designed to convert. Don't you think you would want to know that as an SDR, right?
Well, because I would get pretty down.
And so you go in and you go, hey, and the SDRs are all saying, the leads all suck, the leads all suck.
And it's like, no,
and
it's
demand
fine.
gen's like, well, that's how we designed the model, right? So if you're an SDR, you should have access to that information. Tell them, look, only 1 in 10 is probably going to convert.
So training is like tennis.
Yes, love tennis.
So
All right.
tell us about that.
So when you think about a conversation, it's a back and forth conversation, similar like a tennis point, right? Back and forth, back and forth. So if we break that down, all we can control is how we react to what we receive, right? And so when you think about tennis, there's very simple shots. You've got to serve, forehand, a backhand, a volley, a spike. And when you practice them over and over and over and over and over again. Well, that's the exact same thing as a call. So I can't start a conversation without an opener.
And that's the serve.
And that's the serve, exactly. So we practice it over and over and over again. I can't convey value. I can't explain what we do in a hard-hitting way to a different person or a different use case without practicing my value props. So we do value props over and over and over again. We start with one, then we talk about how to break it out. And every SDR has to have 5 or 6 different value props ready to go. And that's, by the way, a great certification if you want to send someone to an event.
Love
right?
it. Love it.
Now let's go over here. How do I tell a use case story? It's like a use case story, right? How do I tell a use case story? Oh, you know what? That reminds me of another client of mine, right? And they had the exact same situation, and you walk them through how to tell a story, a use case story. An insight. Insights, I think, are, right, what is an insight? It's a sort of generic thing. It's just a relevant or a provocative statement that provides a point of view about a problem that someone faces, right? And so an example of how an insight might sound would be, well, we talk to a lot of different CMOs, and what they tell us is that one of the hardest things about sales development is having them have the same message and be consistent about it. Does that sound like something that's relevant to you? And you might say, like, maybe. Maybe not, because you have an incredible sales development organization, right? But my point is,
every CMO has that problem, no matter how incredible anything is.
And so
that's the slam.
So insights are, they're ways to ask questions, right? All of these are followed up by a question. And so you're breaking.
Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Exactly. And then we can train them how to listen for good opportunities. Train how to listen, right? Whole separate unit on how to listen for a great opportunity to generate a conversation for the sales team, right? And so if you break it down like that, you train them like that, then after calls, you can record the calls, you can score the calls, and you can talk to them.
It's a hard gig.
Yeah.
Why do it? Pitch me.
Why do sales development?
Yes. Why should I become an SDR?
Because the skills you're going to learn as an SDR, you can take with you everywhere for the rest of your life. And I'm not joking about that. The ability to pick up the phone and call anybody. You want to build a business. You want to be a sales rep. You want to be an entrepreneur. Do you want to be an executive at a business? You're going to have to be able to go into people's meetings with people around your business that have never met you before. Generate a quality first impression. Convey like you're some kind of value to them, right? And be able to provide something of value that's going to help them do their job as well. That is a psychological skill that you can take with you in any kind of business leadership and beyond. Secondly, your writing skills, so important. We don't get a lot of practice in writing in the professional world.
And I do think it has to be on point, because the one email that's screwed up is the one that's going to go like viral.
I have a friend who they have a lot of variables in their templates, and he catches one variable, and in an outbound email, you're automatically on pit.
Wow, that's hardcore.
Well, it's how important it is to be detail-oriented at their culture, and it's objective. It's a rule everyone has to follow it, and it's just the only way to guarantee quality, right?
All right. So quality, precision. Why else? What else am I going to learn?
You're going to learn a lot about different businesses. You're going to learn a lot about how to understand businesses, and I think the most important thing you're going to learn is you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about how to persevere through tough days. You're going to learn a lot about every sales rep goes through a day where they say, why am I doing this? And you're going to learn how to persevere through that. You're going to learn time management skills that you have never, ever seen before.
So Dan, do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you agree that the BDR is a BFD?
Oh yeah, I do.
Can you say it? You need to say it.
I agree. Sales development, STRs are a BFD.
They are.
And I think
really big BFD.
It's inarguable. And you go look at some of these businesses, and you go look at some of the best hires around those businesses, and a lot of them started in sales development. It's this talent pipeline that is inarguable.
Love it. Dan, thank you so much for being on Talking Sense. Again, I love your SDR benchmark report. I loved it so much that we license it at 6 cents. So feel free to go to our website and get it.
Thank you for having me. I tremendously appreciate it.
You shared so many great tips. One, all about the importance of the SDR function and just how much pipeline they're driving for B2B companies. So I think 58, 60% of pipeline, which is awesome. You told us all about how to help them prioritize their time, how to tap into technology like AI and big data, how to help them make great connections. So I learned a ton. Can't wait to have you back. You know I love the folks at TOPO. Let's make this episode even more popular than Craig's. How about it?
Looking forward to that.
Thanks, guys. Tune
Thank
in
you.
next time.